What's up, guys? This is Ray, and you're listening to another chapter in Journal of the Whills with Jackalmen Games. On today's episode, we have a very special guest, Jonathan Magnuson from the Destiny Council.
Everything's under control. Situation normal.
What happened?
Had a slight weapons malfunction, but everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now.
All right, so today we have Jonathan Magnuson from the Destiny Council, and we're just going to talk a little bit about kind of his experience at Worlds. We're also have Kevin.
Hey. That's me.
There was like a pause there. I was like, say hi, Kevin.
I'm here.
So, Jonathan, I first wanted to kind of start this off just a little bit of a Q&A. How did you first get into Star Wars Destiny?
Well, for those of you who don't know, I live in Minnesota, so I'm actually like 2 minutes from the FFG Event Center. So that's a bit of an advantage for getting into Fantasy Flight games. But I actually had a friend who was like at the pre-release, and then he's like, yo, you need to come to the pre-release. So he went to the event where they handed out those like little plastic Kylo and Rey cards, like the ginormous ones. And then he got me to go to the next pre-release event. I mean, the rest is history.
There's like pre-gaming for the pre-release, is what it sounded like.
There was like some sort of press event or something, and they handed out a bunch of free stuff or something. I don't know.
Yeah, Jaeger bombs for everybody.
Your Wet Wednesday instead of Thirsty Thursday.
So I was asking you kind of before we started recording, I wasn't even sure myself as far as, you know, the Destiny Council, if you were like the founding member or really how that kind of came about. So I kind of wanted to dive a little bit deeper into what the Destiny Council is and you know, how that formed and how that team kind of came about.
Yeah, so prior to Worlds 2017, so not this past Worlds, but the one before that, game was still really new, and I was playing at a bunch of local events, really loved the game, and I wanted to win Worlds. So I messaged a bunch of players who I thought were good in local Minnesota meta. I was just like, let's playtest for Worlds, let's get ready. So that would have been like Will, Brian, Andrew, myself, and then we also actually had another person playtesting with us, but it was kind of funny because he also playtested with the Tower Games testing group, which is like, that's like Dan Weiser, that World's Winners group. So he was kind of like in between, but he never ended up being on the council. So like basically post Worlds then, we all top 16, did pretty well, had pretty bad top 16 performances. Some of it was luck, some of it was just bad matchups or whatever, but like I had a Poe Ray play like hit and run into like double Poe special to win a game that I was ahead in. It was rough. But yeah, so the top 16 didn't go too well, but felt like we'd done pretty well. And we were just like, hey, we should do a podcast. Podcast never really got going, though. It's really hard, it turns out, to get like 4 people together for a podcast consistently.
Yeah.
But eventually we got our act together and started doing more like article and video focuses, because there you just need 1 or 2 people and you can do it. Yeah, and the rest is kind of history.
The reason why I'm laughing is because we could have had a 4th, but you know it's tough to schedule 4 people for a podcast.
Right. Shout out to Ashton,
Yeah, shout out.
third Jackalman, who could not be with us tonight. But kind of fast forwarding into Worlds 2018. So the reason I reached out to Jonathan, obviously, you know, the community and myself appreciate the content that the Destiny Council pushes out. But the really intriguing thing was Jonathan went to Worlds, and he went with the craziest deck I had ever seen. Unfortunately, he was the bubble boy this year, but kind of explain to us how that was for you.
Well, the event, it was fun. I mean, day one, I was a little bit scared. I lost in the 3rd round, but I won out. I actually ended my last game on day one by playing a probe to mill my opponent his last 2 cards. So that was kind of fun.
Sweet.
That's awesome.
I did like the deck count. I was like, he has 1 cunning left. So I resolved a Talzin discard, hit his cunning, and I was like, oh, nice. And then played probe and milled him. So that was really funny. And then day 2, I don't know what I did wrong, but I did not prepare well enough for my first match because I did some stupid things, and 11 damage was dealt to my Balatique turn 1. And
Wow.
It was literally a Greedo trigger too. I had the choice between hitting Kylo or a Greedo, and I went for Greedo because he had a backup muscle on the board that was going to kill Bala anyways. So I just killed Greedo, and it's that, like, I think it's 55% chance that he rolls a direct range damage. and he just rolled it out and killed my Bala.
Yep.
I was like, well, that's going to be hard. So, yeah, I did so many things wrong in that game, and I just lost it. And then I won out the next 2 games. But actually, in my first round, I got paired down into an X and 2, and I was 5-1. So it made it like my strength of schedule was an X and 2's strength of schedule, essentially.
Right. Right.
And that like totally destroyed me, and it ended up at 17th place at X and 2. I actually lost on the second tiebreaker. So life is hard.
Yeah, I can understand. Like I've had strength of schedule issues myself at regionals, kind of keeping me out of top 8s, just because I was extremely pared down going into like the 7th round of Swiss. And I'm convinced anytime that you are pared down going into something that's meaningful, you'll always lose. It's the way it's gonna work out. That always happened to me, in Magic the Gathering tournaments. If you are pared down in a kind of a win and get in kind of a spot, you're going to lose. So it is what it is. But as far as the strength of schedule, so how did that actually pan out? Where were you sitting, and then what was the percentile kind of difference?
We were both tied at day 2 strength of schedule, and the secondary tiebreaker was day 1 strength of schedule. And I wasn't even close to his day 1 strength of schedule. My day 1 strength of schedule was like really bad for some reason or something, and then his was like insane because I think he played like a 6-0 or something. I don't know, but basically the tiebreaker wasn't even that close on the second tiebreaker. But I don't know, I guess the thing that really upsets me about this whole strength of schedule issue is that there were 19 7-2s, and 9 of them made it. So majority of the top 16 was in there on the bubble. And if they'd done one more round, you'd actually have 0 to 2 players on the bubble. So it's like one thing when strength of schedule gets 1 or 2 players in or knocks 1 or 2 players out, because then you either have an insane strength of schedule or a really terrible strength of schedule. But like the difference between like the 8th best strength of schedule and like the 12th best strength of schedule was minuscule, and it's not really differentiating who's the better player at all. So it seems a little bit silly to me that they didn't run another round.
Do you think you'd be able to play another round though? Like, did you have it in you?
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, they only played 3 rounds of Swiss on Sunday.
Oh, on Sunday? Okay.
Well, here's the other dumb thing, is that because they let all the X and 2s get over there from like day 1 to A, B, and C, those X and 2s actually had basically a 0% chance of making the top cut, which is a little bit silly. So they could have added in like a single game on day 1 and then had all the X and 2s move on, and then everybody who makes it to day 2 has a chance at the top 16. Or they could have just added another round to day 2, and day 2 ended at like 5:30. It's not like it went till midnight or anything. So there was no reason why they couldn't have fit it in. Basically, they had 9 rounds last year with about 200 slots for 200 people. They added a whole nother day this year and added no more rounds. It's like they just kept the same format and like, oh, we don't need to change that. They just didn't do the math or something.
Wow, that's discouraging, that like sitting at that X and 2 spot and knowing due to your strength of schedule that no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to, break that top 16.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty disheartening, I mean, it's like you're excited to make it to day 2, but for what exactly? That's a little frustrating.
You're just like the spoil vote, pretty much. Like you could spoil somebody out.
Yeah, and look at like Bryan actually from the council. He went 4-2 day 1, and then won out day 2, went 7-2, and got 20th. Right? It's just, I mean, obviously, it's as a competitive player, your job is to go 8-1 at that point. But having only 7 people able to secure a spot seems a little bit under. It's just not a big enough number when you have a top 16 and only 7 can get like a clear-cut winning record.
Right. And then when you see like the pages that people are actually posting and you see how many 7-2s really round out that entire sheet. And then I was wondering, I was like, oh, I wonder how many 7-2s go on to the next sheet. And then you were telling me, there was 19 or so 7-2s. Like that's a lot. And they should have figured out a way to kind of thin that down a little bit more and give people a shot to kind of break into that top 16. So I definitely feel you there. That would be extremely frustrating.
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, ultimately, it's my fault for losing twice, but yeah, there's next year.
Yep.
I'll be sure talk to Jeremy if I bump into him and be like, "Yo, make sure there's enough rounds next year."
You live in the same town as him, probably. Just bump into him at Walmart or.
I didn't even think of that because I was thinking I heard Jeremy was like extremely active with a lot of the community and hanging out with the content creators. I was like, oh yeah, next year when he's hanging out with all the content creators. But yeah, you could see him at a gas station or something.
Yeah, I mean, he actually will stop by some local events every once in a while.
Oh, dude.
I mean, he works at where like the local events are held, at Fantasy Flight. So there's no reason for him to not like hop out of his office and be like, "Hi guys."
Right.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Just hearing it, as far as what Sugi was saying about how, he was interacting so much with people there, I think that that's great. And it shows that he is trying to do his best to kind of give the people what they want. So, yeah, Jonathan, I think you should just walk right up to him, poke him in the chest, and tell him one more round.
Yeah, Jeremy's a great guy. Council has a pretty good relationship with him, so
That's
it's
good.
fun.
So your spot, if you will, left us with 17th place Sadness, which is how I was first introduced to this deck, and this is the deck that you brought to the 2018 World Championship. And I was scratching my head. I was telling Jonathan before we recorded that I consider myself, in love with deck building, and I've done many deck tech videos, and I scan the internet all over the place for cool and innovative decks, but I couldn't understand this one. I don't even know how to go into it or do it justice. So, Jonathan, I'm just going to hand it right over. Just give us a feel for what this deck is, and then I'll go through, the actual upgrades, supports, and events, and I kind of just want to get your take as far as why you included them.
Yeah, so I guess if I'm going to talk about the deck, I should talk about its predecessor, which is the Army of Ones deck. I did that like 3 months ago, I think. I wrote an article on it, but that was actually Phasma, Talzin, Greedo. So 2-die Phasma.
Yep.
And the whole concept was I liked messing around with Talzin, and I liked going full in on the odd-costed cards, like right from the get-go. And it introduced interesting deck choice decisions because the cost curve is so different when you can't run zero cost. But one of the principles of that deck was that one-cost dice cards can be played, rolled out, give you a resource, which will then allow you to play more one-cost cards. And over the course of 2-3 turns of the game, this can give you a lot of efficiency. So one of the sides that you'll see on one cost card, so you'll always see on 2 cost cards, that's still really good, is a resource side. And you'll actually see a lot of resource sides on one drop. So like Crystal Ball has 2 resource sides, Bartering has 3 resource sides. And it's kind of functions as a way to help you stay efficient. They also have lots of focus sides. And as long as you can count like one of your dice missing, the focus sides are going to be damage. It's kind of like playing I use the Force, but it can be used on multiple turns. And then the key concept of the Army of Ones deck is that I also include 2 armor platings and 2 Force illusions. So you invest in these 1-drops, use them twice, and then at the end, after you've used it, second time on turn 2, you overwrite with a Force illusion or armor plating on Captain Phasma. And now Phasma is like that much harder to kill, and it kind of the whole deck was just get them stuck on Phasma. Transform that into the actual Worlds deck. It all functions because the dice do a lot of mathematical work. The control is really efficient. So in 5-die decks, you want to reroll a lot. So using cards like Doubt and Hidden Motive to be your control isn't as good as using a single card like Feel Your Anger, Overconfidence, Best Defense to do more work, because then you have another card for rerolls. And basically, because you're running all the odds, except for the 4 event removal cards, you're almost always hitting Talzin ability, which means that in early game, you're going to do a ton of damage. Once you get that early kill, then all those stronger control cards that you have are going to be that much more effective because you've removed half their dice potentially.
Yep, exactly.
And then Balatik on top of that can add in the untap, which then gives you a resource advantage. And because like in this version, you're untapping with usually resource cards. So it'll give you a resource advantage, which will then allow you to play even more control cards next turn, more direct damage cards. And it's the snowball effect. Because you do so much damage, you almost always get a kill round 2, and that will usually lead to victory. There's so much more to talk about in it, but I don't know if maybe you can give me some direction.
We're going to dive a little bit deeper. So just kind of breezing through here, the characters are going to be Elite Mother Talzin, Elite Balatik, and then a single die First Order Stormtrooper. So that's the characters that Jonathan was running. Now, the upgrades, this is where I feel like people would look at this deck and just kind of, like I said, scratch their head or think to themselves, like, what was this guy doing? How did he bring this? And go that far? Because that is exactly what I thought. So his upgrades, he has 10 upgrades in this deck. We have 2 Bartering, 2 Dark Council, 2 DH-17 Blaster Pistols, 2 Force Illusions, and 2 On the Hunt. So, Jonathan, just kind of walk us through this upgrade package.
Yeah, so I guess the best way to describe it is they're the best upgrades for early game kills. So DH17 is a no-brainer. It has the damage sides of a 2-drop die, but it only costs 1. It's also really important that you run 1-drops, because people think, oh, I'll run 4 evens, so I'll run like 4 2-drop redeployed blasters. Problem with that is you can't play those on turn 1 without turning off all of your 1-cost removal. So these are the 1-drop dice of DH17 is a no-brainer. The Dark Council is actually the best die for maximizing damage on turn 1 and turn 2. Or round 1 and round 2, rather. Because it's special. Because you have Talisman Focus, its special can be guaranteed. And when you Talisman Focus to the special side on it, you get an entire another reroll that turn for your 5 character dice. And that's going to allow you to max out your dice much more effectively. And when you use that special and it rolls back in, you have a 50% chance at it either rolling the special again or rolling to focus. And because you have 5 character dice, the focus is essentially going to be 1 or 2 damage. You're either going to change a dice to a 2-side, or you're going to change a dice from a 1-side to a 2-side.
Yeah, getting that extra card for the extra reroll is, I'm learning, is super powerful.
Yeah, especially when you consider how many CQA decks there are. If you get CQA turn 1 for 2 cards, you can just activate, and you're out now, and you're like, activate Talisman, flip to the special, draw a card, discard a reroll, still deal 8 that turn. So it's basically the best card you could possibly have on turn 1 to deal max damage. And once again, it's only 1, so it allows you to still play control that turn. On the Hunt is kind of meta call, but at the same time it's not, because it's a 1-cost die that has 2 3 damage sides for free. Like, there aren't even 3-drops that have that, right? Besides, like, Maul Saber. But on top of that, it has the die removal, and with Talisman being able to guarantee the special side, on turns where you draw and you maybe have only a single control card and you really need more than that, or you didn't hit any control, you can just activate Talisman, flip to the special, and now you have a control op, which is huge. And even if you do have control options, you can use that special to save cards for more rerolls. So in the current meta, where there was lots of Ayla running around, lots of shields just in general, is pretty much a no-brainer.
That goes all the way back to, Vader Raider days. A single on the Hunt or, 2 on the Hunts were definitely in that deck. So I could see that as the meta call. That's definitely a good option.
Yeah, and then finally we have Bartering, which is probably the silliest card. I had so many people like stop me and like, wait, can I read that? But it's actually really good. So it's the way to think of it is it's in a buy and sell things, because you're re-rolling a ton in 5 die. So with 50% resource sides, you're essentially going to roll a resource on it if you want to. It can also be used for damage. So what you can do is you can activate Talisman, flip to the focus side, re-roll all of the dice that have missed damage, and then whatever still misses, that's what you're going to focus into.
Right.
That can usually help. The discard side is really good in the game now. Like, all cards in a Prison Sand are good. So being able to hit cards like Hyperspace Jump randomly can be huge. Just resolving it before you roll out Talisman to protect your dice can be huge. But I think, so yeah, it's an it binds all thing, essentially, is the way to think of it. But also, the special can be used to draw cards. And because you're Talismaning each turn, you know exactly what you're going to draw. So my first game of the tournament, actually, I played against an guy from Artificery, and of course the game's being watched because it's Destiny Council and Artificery, so there were like a couple people watching us, and my first play of the game was to drop a Bartering on Balatik. I had this play round 2 where I Witch Magic'd Bala early, saw that my top card was a backup muscle. Ayla at this point had a Force Illusion on her, so I immediately focused to 2-side on the Trooper, dealt 2, which wasn't enough to kill, and with modifiers in the deck, it was really tempting for him to just take it, so he just ended up taking the damage. Right? So then I activate Talisman, flip to the Bartering special to draw my backup muscle, drop the backup muscle, and kill the Ayla, ignoring the Force Illusion, to then untap my Bala, roll it out, and ended up dealing like 6 to the Ray as well that turn.
Yeah.
And then I ended that game on a free-for-all. Having that utility, once again, with CQA decks, it can be huge to get another draw, but also just knowing that, oh, there's a Frighten on top of my deck and he has 3 shields. I'm going to make a Straw so that I can frighten your shields away. Could be huge. It's a little bit risky, you make your opponent drop, but oftentimes your opponent will actually claim, and you're just sitting there with a Bartering special like, okay, I guess I'll draw cards, and you just get more rerolls at the end of your turn. But the biggest thing, in addition to all of that, is that it binds all things that untaps when Bala gets a kill. So it has the potential to give you 2 resources in a turn quite easily. So when you get this Bala untap and you roll them out and you're just like, oh, more resources, which is then Witch Magics, it's more Force Illusions, it's more backup muscles, it's more Frightens, which all essentially are 3 damage cards anyways. So that 1 resource side on that Bartering does more damage than the...
I just like how much of like the natural focusing you have here. You know, with an elite Talzin and elite Bala, they both have focuses on their die. You know, Mother Talzin having her ability to, you know, to focus through her ability, and then everything else is like it's like utilities. It's just small things to kind of maximize the damage that you have, that's already, you know, kind of right in front of you. So that's what I really liked. What I also want to ask is who came up with this? Was this like a Destiny council? Let's sit down and we each kind of say like, hey, I really like this one, or hey, you know, John, you should really be considering this one, or was this 100% J Mags?
It was like 99.5% me. I mean, I was the only one crazy enough to think that Bartering and Dark Council and all these other 1-drops were insane. I think there were, like, obviously I play tested against all of my teammates, but the biggest thing that I would have gotten a little bit of a push for is my brother kept pushing me to put in Friends in Low Places and Probe. And then I tried it once and I was like, oh my goodness, this is so insane.
I just think that a Dark Council and Bartering is just 10 times stronger with
Oh
Talzin.
yeah, definitely.
That's what makes them crazy. Like in a different deck, Bartering and Dark Council, or with a different character, they wouldn't be as crazy as they are. Because being able to see what you're going to draw is... Nobody else lets you do that.
I was going to say it's kind of reminiscent of like Magic the Gathering, kind of. If people are familiar with that, it has an ability like Scry, and it basically allows you to foresee what's coming by taking a look at the top card of your deck. I think it's super smart. John kind of broke that mechanic into the game and kind of introduced card advantage. I mean, card advantage is good in most any CCG, but sometimes it's kind of few and far between in Destiny. And I really like that you kind of have kind of utility cards in there that fuel your hand, but also give you the ability to kind of know what's coming. So that's like extremely strong. You're really, you know, without even including Crystal Ball, you're doing your own little crystal ball here.
Yeah, definitely. I will say that I think that Bartering is still a really efficient card and could be in other decks. The biggest problem is that if you're investing cards into utility upgrades, you're going to have less slots for your control cards and your damage upgrades. And the reason why you can afford it in this 5-die deck is because you have 10 damage on your character dice from the get-go. So if you could find another deck that can just make use of the resources, like in a hero deck, for example, you could play the Bartering on turn 1, take resources from it, and then turn 3 you overwrite it with a second chance. And essentially it just generated 2 free resources for you. So I think it could have place in other decks. As I said, it's so hard to fit in utility cards in general.
So I'll go right into some of the other cards here. So the supports, I don't think need too much explanation. He's got 2 backup muscles. The events, it's a pretty flavorful list. I'll just kind of shoot through some of them. So we have, you know, the 2 of Feel Your Anger, the 2 Flank. I'll leave the kind of the best ones for last, the ones that we really want to talk about. The 2 Frightens, 1 Overconfidence, 1 Tactical Mastery, 2 Best Defense, 2 Witch Magic, which is one of my favorite cards. And then the 3 cards that I kind of wanted to leave out was the 2 Probes, the 2 Friends in Low Places, and the 2 Free-for-alls. So kind of explain your lines of play with those cards, because I really think in this deck they worked. And, you know, when I was reading your 5-die free-for-all write-up about this deck, when you discussed why you included those, not so much Friends in Low Places, I guess I'll throw that one off, but really the free-for-all and the probes I was very intrigued by. If you can kind of explain the rationale of including those two, that would be awesome.
As you said, card advantage has never been too big of a deal in Destiny because you always draw up to 5. But that being said, being able to discard cards from your opponent's hand is always good. It reduces their options for the turn. It reduces their reroll counts. It's one of the most undervalued aspects of the game, and I mean, it took so long for people to start running Close Quarters Assault. I mean, we always felt like that card was just nuts. Hitting the hand is important. So Probe, especially in this meta with the Hyperspace Jumps decks that we found to be quite powerful, and with like Hero Mill and other decks that are running these big events that they hold on to, it's good for those matchups, obviously. But even more so, it's good in this deck, oddly enough, because you don't show your threatening dice very early in the turn. What you want to do with Probe is you want to play it once your opponent's down to like 3 or 2 cards. Ideally 2, obviously, but usually it's going to be played against 3 cards, and then you have a 66% chance at hitting their best control option. And what you do is you end up, like, your first action I mean, usually you get shields, so they go first, and then your first action is to play an upgrade, and your second action is like roll Balatique, and Balatique's dice are terrible. They have modifiers on them. The upgrades you're playing are just going to show like focus, sides, and resources, so they're not going to remove those dice. Then you end up playing a control card as your third action, and then it's not until your fourth action that you'd actually be activating Talzin. So this gives your opponent times to do things like play an upgrade, roll up their character, roll their other character, discard to reroll, right? Like their fourth action is a discard to reroll, which means that they're down to 3 cards now. So then you can probe at that point before activating your Talzin, and you haven't given your opponent the opportunity to play their control cards before probe is likely going to hit them. If you want to stall even one turn more, you can take a turn to activate your trooper, which has a good chance of showing a side they'd want to remove. But ultimately, the dice you're really concerned about is Talzin, so you don't want her dice to get removed. So probe is good in that sense because, as I said, you're usually going to be able to play it against a hand of 3 cards. Free for All is just an insane card, mainly because the deck eliminates characters so quickly. I mean, early or end of round 2. At that point, it makes it really hard for a deck to control you at all, because there are very few cards that just remove random blanks, random resources, random focuses on all of your dice at once, besides like Mind Trick, which means it's hard for them to mitigate you in late game. And because the Bala untap puts a few damage onto their other character, at that point, you just roll out 7 dice and free for all them. It's just a way of making your games in late game more secure, because you need to find a way to turn your utility cards into value and to actually closing out characters. While it normally would be hard to kill a character with just 3 damage dice, because let's say you've lost Vala at this point, having free for all means that if you have your 3 1-drops on Talzin, you can just free for all for 5 damage. And if you can just play Tactical Mastery free for all, there's nothing they can do about it. You can't miss on your roll off. It has the huge advantage of you're at Worlds and nobody expects you to be playing that card. So it's just gonna kill them, and they can't do anything about it. Like I've had so many games where it's just like, oh, activate Bala, activate Talzin, free for all for 8, the game's over.
I really like the built-in synergy of Frighten, Ambush into Free for All. Like that's super sweet.
Yeah, definitely. Like all the shield decks will play around them having more health left than they really do against you.
Right. No, I'm like in love with the deck. Now, one question that I had for you about this was I was surprised not to see like a dug in here. I know you said you kind of like to slow play the deck, and you're really kind of conscious of how many actions are being taken so that you can, kind of optimize your probes or your friends in low places, things like that. Was it difficult for you to keep these characters alive with kind of the intense amount of aggro decks that were out there? Because, as a whole, you have a decent chunk of health, but they can really start mowing these characters down. What did you really do to kind of keep them off that?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up aggro decks, because aggro decks are kind of what the deck is actually best against.
Awesome.
Because, I mean, you have 5 dice, you're going to win the roll-off a lot. So usually you have a 10 health Bala, sometimes a 9 health if you're playing against blue villain, because you don't really want to toss 2 shields onto one character. But even if you lose the roll-off, you get Fort and Axes, which means that you have 2 Guardians for your Balatique on turn 1. It's going to be really hard for them to kill a character, because on top of you having Guardians or 2 extra health on Bala, you have 11 one cost removal, and they're all really good. Feel Your Anger is the least, consistent, but it has the potential to just blow out entire turns. Flank is just going to get rid of a die, right? It's more consistent than Doubt. If you doubt a Boba dice on turn 1, it might just deal 2 damage to you anyways, 50% of the time. Whereas Flank just gets rid of it. Overconfidence can mitigate 2 dice. Best Defense will mitigate 2 dice. The Witch Magic is going to heal 3. Force Illusion is probably going to prevent 3. So you have way better control than all of the aggro decks, but you deal just as much damage as the aggro decks, and more consistently, because you have 10 damage on your character dice as well. And while they might be able to get out there and roll their dice faster and stuff like that, you're usually able to mitigate enough to the point where they can't kill you. And then, because aggro decks like Boba Phasma, Boba 7th, have all these terrible control cards that aren't very efficient, you just wreck them. You kill that Phasma on round 2, untap and deal 4 to the Boba, and you haven't even lost your Balatique. And now it's 3 characters against a 7 health left Boba. Especially against the aggro decks, it was just a walk in the park, because they have to invest so many cards into their aggressive game plan that involve action cheating. They need to make sure they have the aggressive upgrades in there. their control suites are like 8 to 10 cards at most.
I know that you've said before when you kind of have mitigation cards that are going to be, one cost, you're going to get more than the zero cost mitigation cards. It's just, inherent to the game itself that if you're paying more, you're going to get something a little bit better. I know that, Kevin, I'm sure you find this funny, but anyone who's been playing like Awakenings and on and have seen how great Balatik is, they have no problem keeping him alive. They're like, hey, it's an 8 health character, put 2 shields on him. He's good for at least 4 or 5 rounds. Like, no problem. Like, they know how to keep that 8 health character alive. He untaps, no problem at all.
We're digging into Padawan right now. That's our 7 health character that we can keep alive for days. Like, I feel like now that I've practiced with Padawans, I can definitely dip into Balatik now.
I think that one thing that's important to realize is that it's not just having lots of control, it's also having a mixture of dice removal and like
hand removal.
Preemptive.
Too. Yeah.
But hand removal and preemptive healing and preemptive damage block. So having the 2 Witch Magics and 2 Force Illusions can allow you to, ignore their dice at the beginning of turn 1, roll out all your dice, take that resource, and play Witch Magic retroactively to set back how much damage they actually dealt to you, and then play a Force Illusion proactively before they can action cheat next turn.
So I've been sitting here looking at the 17th place Sadness deck on Star Wars Destiny database, and I'm reading the comments section, man, and there's one guy tearing into you. I don't want to call him out because that's impolite, but it's just, dude, he's just like, this deck is garbage. And is, what, how did this go 7-2? This is 17th place, but it just,
it's the part that cracks me up is when he then starts telling Jonathan about everything he needs to take out and all the things he needs to put in.
Yeah, and he's already had success with the deck. And this is something that I was prone to because I'm a very new player. I really am. But like, if the dice isn't showing like a 4 melee, it's like, whatever, I hate this dice. Like when you look at bartering, you're like, ew, dude, like this doesn't, there's no damage on this. Why? But it's like, you need to think about it as how does it affect your dice? So when Ray and I we've been playtesting for my Galactic Qualifiers this weekend, and Ray's like, yo, it's all in the focuses. Like, focuses are your safety net. And so I feel like I was that comment last week. And I feel like through talking to you, I'm now on the other side of the fence. Like, I get it. I totally understand how this deck works and the mentality.
Now, my question is, like, how many reps did you get with this deck?
That is also, yeah, I agree.
Ew. I guess I would have started playing this version about a month beforehand. I don't know, maybe 30 to 50 games at most.
Was it like a secret, or did you play it at your locals and all that stuff?
Oh, it was a secret.
Okay.
So I'm one of those people who I don't know why, but I treat my decks like babies, and like I want to tell the world about how great my baby is, right? Like, this is the cutest baby in the world. You just, like, all over. And, like, I'm that way with all of my decks I've ever played. Like, Poe-Ray, I was like, guys, you need to play Poe-Ray. Thrawn Taliesin, come on, guys, come play Thrawn Taliesin. Or Swiftness, Concentrate, Qui-Gon Kanan. It's always been like, I want to convince the world that my deck's good and you need to play it. So it was really hard for me to not talk about the deck beforehand. It's such a unique build, and it was a deck that wasn't on anyone's radar. Like, in the first place, nobody wanted to play 5-die villain. In the second place, it's not even close to the 5-die villain list. So not revealing it was too big of an advantage to reveal it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Someone sits across the table from you, watches you drop, First Order Stormtrooper, Balatik, Mother Taliesin, and they go, I know this deck. Yeah. And then they're like, I do not know this deck. In round 2, like that has a lot of power.
Like, that's what regional season is. And I looked at Worlds as like one big, obviously the culminating event of, okay, we kind of hashed out all of our surprises week from week, because during this regional we saw Poe Hondo decks pop up, and then it was, wow, Yoda Hondo's a lot better. And as we keep going, then you had Rey Ayla kind of just popped up at the very end there, and it was a surprise every week. And it was kind of interesting to see what rose to the top and who came up with what. For you to be holding this out, a month before Worlds, I think that's awesome. Nothing as far as erratas hit this deck at all, so you don't have to worry about that. I was very impressed by not only the intelligence that was there, but also the balls to take a deck like this to Worlds. And I think you did great.
Well, thank you. I mean, none of my teammates ended up playing it. I kept trying to convince them, you guys need to play this deck. But it didn't. It's oddly enough, it didn't have the best stats in our testing because whenever anybody else would pick it up to play it, they'd lose because it takes a few games to get into the groove and kind of start realizing what you need to be doing. So all these win percentages were like bad parts, and nobody wanted to play it. And I was like, no, guys, trust me. It's so good. Brian actually ended up playing it in pods.
Oh, nice.
He went 6-0 in pods.
Yeah. You say in reply to that.
Call him out. Truth123. He wants you to add fragmentation grenades. You need hidden blasters, and you need some hunting rifles. You don't know what you're doing, Jonathan. This is what you need to add.
Hunting rifles, crystal ball.
The funniest part of the whole thing is the suggestion that I should run Outer Rim Outpost. That is the battlefield that will benefit every single deck ever made, and I am not going to claim. Right?
Yeah.
Like, whereas Ford and Axes will benefit almost no decks, and will benefit me on turn 1.
Yes.
Yeah. So how many 3-wide decks did you see at Worlds?
1.
One. Because I feel like this is an auto win against other 3-wide decks.
Yeah, I played against a Yoda Ray Padawan, that like action cheating with horsepower / sabers thing.
Yep.
And I put 8 damage on Yoda turn 1, and round 2 round 2 I killed Yoda, killed Padawan, and put 3 on Ray.
Balatik just eats 3-wide. That's just what he does.
Yeah.
I was just like, okay, so I have the unpopular opinion that the standard hero vehicles list, like the Ayla, Rose, Ezra, is absolute trash. And people think that deck's good, so I was just like, come on, guys, show me the vehicles decks. I'll come at you with my Bala and just destroy you.
Yeah.
And I didn't see a single vehicles deck. Like, I was 5-1 going into day 2, and both Taxter and Joe were playing vehicles decks. I'm like, yes, let me get paired against them, because they were both 5-1. Nope. It was just like, oh, Kylo Greedo of all things.
Yeah, you just eat Ezra.
I watched that video of Jonathan's rant, and I was like, I was just in the middle of doing a kind of like a editing for NJ Cuenca's vehicle deck, and it's exactly like Ayla, Ezra, Rose, and I had to add in there. I was like, Jonathan, I respectfully disagree with your rant about hero vehicles, and let's continue the video. So it was pretty funny because you had dropped it like the day before I put out the video, and I was like, oh.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I recognize that it's an unpopular opinion, and there are plenty of good players who disagree with me, so, I mean, I could very well be wrong. From just, like, testing against the deck, the game is just so easy if you kill Ezra.
Oh, yeah.
Like, unless they get lucky and draw, like, 2 easy pickings round 1, it's just the correct choice, and I feel like nobody goes for Ezra. They all go for Rose or for Ayla, and the problem is, if you go for Rose, you might not kill her round 2, and then when you kill her round 3, it doesn't matter anymore. She's already generated 3 to 4 resources.
Right.
It's like, why? Whereas if you kill Ezra turn 1, you have the potential of making 4 of their control cards essentially dead turn 2, which will allow you to end up killing Rose on round 2 anyways, because now they can't protect her because they drew an easy pickings and a garbage shoot, and they're like, do I really want a garbage shoot round 2?
I'm telling you, Jonathan's rant it'll hit videos, it'll hit podcasts. He should show up to Worlds with like 3-wide vehicles come at me on the back. That's what it should say.
Yeah.
It won't even be a deck anymore next year. Everybody's gonna be like, remember that ancient relic? 3-wide vehicle?
My problem is I like debating, so when there's something that I disagree with people on, I just want to keep talking about it until we agree.
Until we agree. But Jonathan, thank you so much for kind of sitting down with us and going through your deck list. You wrote the article and the write-up on the deck, and I appreciated that. But I wanted to give it, another platform to showcase exactly, like I said before, how smart I thought this deck was and how risky, but really cool. I think if people kind of, hit the download button on Star Wars Destiny DB and throw it into their TTS and get some reps with it, or certainly put it together, because you've said in articles there's no legendaries in this deck, nothing that's crazy amounts of money to kind of put together. So put it together, see how you guys like it, and certainly get your reps in. And I think it definitely has a lot of legs behind it. And I know that I would be certainly happy if I was in Jonathan's position, even though he was, the bubble boy, but we still love him all the same.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Yeah, it was quite funny when we realized that my deck had 0 legendaries, and then Andrew playing Yoda Hondo has like 12 legendaries, because he's got like 2 Yodas, 2 X8s, 2 Force Speeds, 2 Light Bows, 2 Force Waves, Let's see what else. I don't know, but it's like, and I'm just sitting over here like, I got some rares.
Mostly commons and uncommons, but you know.
Because I only run the 8 rares and then the 5 rares from the characters. But
Yeah, not even all of your upgrades are rares.
yeah, I got that 4 solutions.
Got them 4 solutions. But any parting words for the community as far as deck building? You know, just what I really want to get from this this podcast too is like just dig down into the cards, really like examine them and take a look at what you got and try to find some sweet spots. Like I think that you really abused a little bit of card advantage and a ridiculous amount of focus. The natural focus on your characters, as well as like the utility focus through these cheap 1-cost upgrades, just really smart. And the damage might not, it might not be written on the cards, but the damage potential is there. So I encourage people to really dive down. Sometimes I open up my binders or I shuffle through cards and I just kind of look at the ones that I haven't seen in a little while or I've kind of just dismissed. So what kind of like parting words would you give either new players or even experienced players as far as, looking a little bit deeper?
I think that one of the things people need to realize in deck building is that resources on dice are incredibly valuable. And that's a big part of the deck, realizing that, taking a card like Bartering can provide me with resources and other utility options that will be important. People seem to realize it with cards like It Binds, but they don't realize it with dice. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why Thrawn Talisman works. It's because Thrawn has a 2 resource side, and when you take that 2 resource sides, it's going to translate into 6 damage between Witch Magics and other cards that are 1 for 3 at this point in the game. The more cards we get, the more efficient resources can get, so the more valuable cards that can give you some resources are going to be. Also, just realizing focuses on 1-cost dice are nuts, because if you think about it, you play cards like Concentrate, and you pay 2 resources to turn 2 dice, and you're like, oh, that was good. Usually it's an action cheat, but sometimes you do without it. But a 1-cost focus die can do that any number of times. And because you're going to miss with some of your dice, that 1 focus on your Dark Council is just as much damage as, a 2 damage on an upgrade die. It's just, you need to be able to think about the game in terms of more than just the face value. There's only so far you can stretch it. Obviously, if you have 10 dice with focuses, not all of the focuses are going to have value because there's not enough dice to focus. If you have 20 resources but can't spend them, they're useless. But it's important to be able to take a step back and be like, what are the values on these resource sides on my dice? And realize, oh, that 1 resource on my Bartering is more damage than the 2 side on my DH17, because my cards do more than the DH17 does.
Don't get focus crazy, because I remember, and I laugh at this, but when special chaining was kind of becoming a big thing, and people were like, you can really do this? And I was kind of explaining it to someone at my locals, and they had asked, well, can I just special chain focuses? And I said, if they're all going to be 1 focus, yeah, go ahead, try. And he just basically, you get rid of all of your dice and you just end with one thing that you wanted to focus. And so, yeah, don't go focus crazy, ladies and gentlemen, but understand when they need to be used. Kevin, you've been quiet.
Well, I was just gonna make a joke.
Go ahead, say it.
I was just gonna say, don't judge your dice by its faces.
Oh,
That's what I was gonna say.
I feel like I might have messed up the timing with a long rant.
No, it's cool.
All right.
You can move it around. What?
All right, Jonathan, thank you so much.
Why are you groaning at me? Wait, was that just so good, or is that just so bad?
It was bad. It was cringe bad.
Yo, you're cringe bad.
Sometimes you just have to say the bad jokes, because then the good jokes can be good.
Yeah, I'm keeping it in there, by the way.
That's
but
fine.
Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us. I know you got to run. You're a busy man.
Well, thank you for having me. I always, as I said, I treat my decks like babies. So anytime I can talk about them.
Talzin is the cutest baby.
Talzin,
I don't know about that.
baby.
She looks kind of creepy.
She's so cute.
Kevin's 2 for 2 right now.
She's got I don't know about that.
Okay, I'm sorry. We're gonna let it end now. I apologize.
All right, everybody. Until next time. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Kevin.
Yep.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.